Good morning, and thank you for coming today. My name is Heather Brown, and I am a student working towards my teaching credential for elementary students. And in working towards my credential, I've done some research and learned a little bit about some special needs students who have autism, and wanted to share with you today a little bit of information about that. As prospective teachers, you are considering a career in teaching and in education, and I wanted to tell you a little bit about autistic students so that maybe you would consider teaching these absolutely wonderful children and that you would be aware of the opportunities available to you to teach and work with special needs students in the school system today. I've given you each a handout, and I'd love for you to refer to it throughout our conversation this morning. There's some information on here for you, some definitions, and also a place for you to write down some notes and even some reflection regarding what we've shared today. In order to understand educating an autistic student, you first really need to know what autism is. So by definition, autism is a neurodevelopmental disorder that usually becomes apparent by age 3 and persists throughout adulthood. It affects communication, social interaction, creative and imaginative play, coordination, or motor skills. However, these hallmarks can vary quite a bit from person to person in terms of severity. The full range of symptoms is commonly referred to as autism spectrum disorders, or ASD. Autism spectrum disorders run the gamut from low to high. A high-functioning autistic student is a student who can communicate and work well in a social setting, who can be in an environment where there's lots of people and be able to function. On the flip side, a low-functioning autistic child is a student who can't communicate at all sometimes and who is very uncomfortable in an environment with lots of people and can very often not function at all in a large group. When you understand that there's such a wide range of situations and struggles for an autistic student, you come to realize that not one education program is going to fit every single student. And so currently there are 2 programs that are the most common in educating an autistic student. One is called inclusion and the other is called special day or special education. I want to share with you about these 2 programs specifically. First, let's start with special education. A special education program is designed specifically for an autistic child who is less functioning, who struggles more in an environment where there's lots of students and lots of things going on. These students often can't communicate very well at all, and sometimes will even have outbursts in the classroom, which then are disruptive to other students. Did you have a question?
Yeah, what do you mean by outbursts?
An outburst can either be physical or verbal. Sometimes a student will throw a book across a room or begin screaming or push. Sometimes even it's physical towards other people, like biting or kicking or yelling, maybe falling on the floor and throwing a tantrum. Does that explain it a little better for you?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, good. So these outbursts can often disrupt the classroom, and that's why in a special day class there's usually a 2 or 3 to 1 student to teacher ratio, which means these teachers who are educated and aides who are educated and trained in autism are there to work with these students to make sure that they are able to concentrate and stay on task. These classrooms are also designed so that the teacher doesn't stand in front and talk all day, but works one-on-one with the students with hands-on learning, specifically working with their communication needs and helping them learn how to function in a regular, real-world environment. But they need to do that in a very special, safe environment first before they let these kids go out into a traditional education program. Often, they do specific things over and over because autistic children love consistency and routine. My friend Grace Rich, who's an educational aide in one of these special classes, says that they often choose one student to greet every day. And then the kids all come in and they greet the student by looking at them, by speaking to them, and having communication every single day, which teaches the children to communicate and to look someone in the eye and to greet them. But it also teaches them a schedule and a routine, which gives them a feeling of safety and security. This kind of classroom is perfect for those low-functioning kids, but a high-functioning autistic student would be frustrated in this environment because they're not given as many opportunities to develop relationships and communicate, because often the kids in their class can't communicate at all. So these high-functioning students really need to go to another kind of program called inclusion or mainstreaming. A mainstreaming program is a program that gives the students the opportunity to be in the classroom they would normally be placed in if they weren't suffering from autism. They're with students their own age at their own grade level. And they're learning how to communicate and function in an environment that's a lot like traditional society. Usually these students have an educational aide who's with them a majority of the day, which will kind of aid their transition into traditional classrooms and be there to help that autistic child function if they end up having a difficulty with a presentation or something that's going on in the classroom. But the teacher is there to treat them just like every other student. The teacher requires them to raise their hand, to sit at their desk, to work well with other students, to go to recess. All the things that a kid would encounter in a regular classroom, they're going to encounter in an inclusion program. But these programs give these students so many opportunities to communicate with their peers, to learn how to have conversations, to learn how to work one-on-one with other students. Things that a special day program might not provide the inclusion student, the autistic student with. And so that's why inclusion is very valuable for these students. Now, sometimes inclusion doesn't work, and sometimes special day doesn't work. If kids in an inclusion program and they're struggling to communicate or understand, or they're overwhelmed by the noises and sounds of a regular classroom, they might need to be moved to a special day program. Or a kid in a special day program might become frustrated because they're not given the opportunity to communicate, or to go on the playground with other students, or to sit in an assembly with the rest of the classroom, and they're ready for that. Then they maybe need to be moved into a mainstream program. No one class will fit for every child with autism, and no one program will work great for every autistic child through their educational career. So these programs need to be constantly evaluated on a child-to-child basis, and they're very often case-specific. But the great thing is that there are programs for children who are autistic, and it's not just a cookie-cutter program that says you have to fit in this box, but there are opportunities for autistic children to be in a regular program as well as to be in a special day program. No matter what the child needs, there's an opportunity for them to find a safe place to learn and grow and for their specific needs to be met. Now, what does this mean for you as a prospective teacher? This is an opportunity for you to consider being a special education teacher and working in an environment with autistic children. Does anybody have any further questions?
What kind of special education are you meaning?
Well, if you decide to become a special education teacher, you would need to get a special education credential and take classes specifically related to teaching special education students, which will then give you a great wealth of knowledge to draw upon in becoming a teacher. I just really want to share with you and encourage you to consider working with these special autistic children, either in an inclusion program where you have an autistic child in your regular classroom, or becoming a special education teacher and working one-on-one with these students. Thank you so much for coming today and taking the time to listen to me. I appreciate it. Have a great afternoon.